Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Social Media and Big Data 101 for GIS Professionals, brought to you by GPS World, Geospatial Solutions, and Platinum sponsor Hemisphere. I'm Bethany Chambers from North Coast Media, publisher of GPS World magazine, and I will be your event manager. Before we get started, I want to let you know that today's webinar will be recorded. You are currently in a listen-only mode. The recording will be available 2 weeks from today on both of our websites, at gpsworld.com/webinars and geospatial-solutions.com/webinars. A link to the on-demand recording will also be emailed to you when it is available. At this time, I'd like to acquaint you with the ways in which you can participate during today's presentation. Please notice in the lower left-hand corner of your console that there is a Submit button. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. Just type in the text box at the bottom left, then click Submit to place your question in queue. Questions submitted during the event may be covered in this webinar. Some questions may also be answered in an upcoming issue of GPS World magazine or in one of our many e-newsletters. We strive to answer as many of your questions as possible. Finally, if you experience any technical difficulties during today's event, select Help to submit your issue, and assistant producer Diane Safranik or I will personally assist you. Now I'd like to turn today's event over to our moderator, GeoIntelligence Insider e-newsletter editor, Art Kalinski.
Thank you, Bethany. I want to thank everyone for joining us. This kind of started because when I was at the ESRI conference several weeks ago, I was surprised how many people that are in the GIS community really weren't familiar with social media and big data. And so I thought it might be good to have an overview of what this topic is, because it's going to have a big impact on what we're doing. I'm trying to move the slide forward here. There we go. Our participants today are retired General Edwin Skip Vincent, Eric Gakstatter, who's with Geospatial Solutions, Dr. Dan Tolley with Soft Power Solutions, Robert Dowling with GeoCOP, Steve Lutton with TerraGo Technologies, and I'm not going to get into a detail on their biographies. They're available for you on the links to the right. So we're going to get right into the program because our time is tight here. First of all, this entire environment started with the early concepts of Web 2.0, in which people believed that ultimately the web would go to a point where people were not only users of the data, but each one of them were actually creators and suppliers of the data. And we've pretty much gotten to that point with all the social media. So today, the topics that we're going to cover in particular are, number one, what is big data? Number two, the types of social and public media, the mechanics of location, the relevance in different countries, how GIS data can be used to enhance that information, and a number of real-world cases and examples, and then where to get additional information. The whole term big data, for a lot of people, just really hadn't been all that clear, but it's just kind of a catch-all phrase, basically saying data sets that are so huge that they require supercomputers to process them. And for years, people were using Craze and more recently IBM Watson to look at big data sets such as weather data, genome data, and in particular, we're going to be talking about social media. That's the focus of what we're talking about today. And as many of you know, social media has really grown from just being a toy that kids play with to a really serious source of information, and even more so in developing countries. I know I still don't have a Twitter account, not interested in having one, and the only reason I'm on Facebook is to look at pictures that my kids post. But the types of social media that are being used as these data sources are primarily Twitter and Facebook blogs, and then, of course, the public media, news and print feeds and so on. And this really ends up being billions and billions of pieces of communication that would be almost impossible to sort through if it wasn't for computers and our ability to sort through them. And it's a big tool that's helping us now drastically with disaster response, civil unrest. Of course, business uses it, and our national intelligence agencies use it extensively also. it's become a valuable tool, but by combining it with GIS data and the analytics that you have in a GIS, it becomes an even more powerful environment. So with that, let me get Eric to talk about some of the mechanics of location, because that's obviously key when you're talking about a GIS.
Yeah, thanks, Art. Yeah, it's actually fascinating. You know, my background is GPS and GIS, so this really fits in here kind of nicely. But it's even so, it was, I guess, confusing, or I'm really ignorant about how, or I was really about how, you know, how does your phone gather location information, and how is your location information tied to a tweet and so on. And so I had a conversation with a guy at ESRI who sort of educated me a bit, and it's really fascinating if you think about this. And when I think of social media and geolocation, you know, I'm thinking of crisis events or disaster events like Hurricane Sandy, or you know, the Gulf oil spill, those kinds of events where social media was used in conjunction with geolocation to map out, you know, okay, for example, in Hurricane Sandy, you know, you can see, if you watch this real-time map published by ESRI, you can see the tweets are coming in certain areas with the hashtag power on them. So there's some kind of power issue in that part of town, you know, that was hit by the hurricane. But what was fascinating to me to learn that I didn't understand is that only, and this is the number that the gentleman gave me, was that only 2 to 3% of all tweets that are sent out have a geolocation tied to them. And so my second question was, you know, how accurate are those particular tweets? Because you have to you know, opt in to these to have your geolocation published, and it's a sort of a 3-step process for what I understand. Number one, in the app setup, and I'm going to use Twitter as an example. In the app setup, you have to opt in with the app, for example, Twitter, and say, hey, yes, I want it location enabled. And a lot of people, that's the first step they don't opt into. They'll say, well, no, I really don't want to do it right now, so I won't. So you have to opt in when you set up the app, and it's under the setup menu, wherever that is. And then you also have to turn on location services on your phone, which aren't necessarily on by default. For example, on my phone, I typically turn the GPS off and location services off just to save power, if nothing else. And when I crank up the application, then it says, hey, your location services are turned off. Do you want to turn them on? Okay, that's the second thing you have to do, is have location services turned on. Thirdly, you have to tell the app that, hey, you know, for example, if I want to send a location tweet, it's going to say, hey, do you want to? We want to use your location. Is that okay with you? So you have to opt in then also. So it's a 3-step process, and so what it ends up being is, again, about 2 to 3%. So, for example, up at Hurricane Sandy, and if you Art, if you go ahead, well, actually, I'll advance to the next slide here.
Yeah, it's on now.
You're already there. Okay, so this hurricane, this is a great video. If you go to videos.esri.com and search for social information, you can watch this 7 or 8 minute video, and it's a great example of how it shows Twitter being used to report power outages and other kinds of urgent situations. But again, this is only based on 2 to 3% of all the tweets out there that were sent. Just because people they don't opt into the system, they prefer not to. You know, it's ends up being, I guess, somewhat of a cultural thing. You know, people are really concerned about their privacy. And one example that the gentleman gave me was, you know, it was the Japan earthquake in 2011, when they sort of thought that, hey, there's going to be a ton of tweets coming in, we're going to have a ton of data that we can aggregate and really create some neat real-time maps. But I guess the culture in Japan is to really hold that location information very tightly. They're not very apt to let others know where they're at, and so the number of tweets with geolocations assigned to them was only about 1%, from what he said. So the Japanese culture might be such that, hey, you know, this doesn't work for them because they don't want people to really know where they are. In the U.S., maybe it's a bit different. In India, it's maybe even different than that. So, but generally speaking, about the highest that they've seen was 5%, and that was during the Gulf oil spill. And you can sort of speculate why that is. Maybe the culture of those particular folks working down there were more tech-oriented and more apt to be able or to be willing to let their location be known. Twitter, it really is to me, it's sort of the major tool for this geolocation stuff. I signed up for Twitter probably 3 years ago. And it's sort of a habit thing. And if you don't do it often, then it's really not extremely useful. But in terms of real-time news, I mean, it's my go-to source for really up-to-date news. I don't go to Yahoo. I don't go to any other source. I go to Twitter because it really, you can get real-time news within minutes of when it happened if you watch the right hashtag. And that hashtag part really is the super important part. It's sort of the database key that aggregators use to compile information about an event. And let's take Hurricane Sandy, for example. When tweets are being sent out, you can put a hashtag on a particular statement, and let's say Sandy, and that may become the default tag for that particular event. And I was talking to the ESRI guy because they publish these real-time maps, and he said they actually manually look at the tweets coming in and watch, because some, in the beginning of the event, it may start out as, hashtag Sandy Hurricane, that whole long word, okay? But since in Twitter you're only allowed 140 characters, it likely was shortened up to, hashtag Sandy during that time. And so that's the key word that ESRI, or whoever the aggregator is, would focus in on to compile all this data coming in and then be able to produce these real-time maps. So,
well, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm looking at our schedule here, Eric.
Go ahead.
Any other key points?
Yeah, just one more key point is how the location is actually computed. Is it with GPS? Is it with Wi-Fi? Is it with cell towers? And really, with the modern mobile phones today, it's really a combination of all three. And just really quickly, if you're indoors in a convention center and you turn on your location services, it's immediately going to go out and look at Wi-Fi hotspots and get an immediate position, general position based on those. And then as you move outdoors or GPS becomes available, GPS is used to further refine that location. So that's sort of the mechanics of it. So back to you, Art.
Good. Thank you very much. All right. And Eric referred to working overseas, and this was the surprise to me, is that many second and third world countries have leapfrogged a lot of our technology, and social media in many cases has a more dominant effect on the culture than even some of the public media because they don't have access to it. So in this case, like in Afghanistan, I mean, they slap together these kind of wireless networks. One of them is called Fab 5, which is really homemade parabolic antennas and off-the-shelf hardware. And they create these Wi-Fi networks from town to town. And this has been just a tremendous tool, and it just shows the ingenuity and creativity. And, while we're on the subject of Afghanistan, probably the most glaring and a strong example of the power of both social media and then responding to it was an experience that General Skip Vincent, who is with us, had in Afghanistan right after the Koran burning incident, when riots were going and all of that. He personally has been involved in over 1,000 soft power engagements in Afghanistan when he was on active duty. And when he retired, he realized this power of winning the hearts and minds of people as a tremendous tool to, quite frankly, save the lives of a lot of our soldiers by trying to do things in a way that doesn't always require people to go in with guns blazing. So with that, General, let me turn it over to you to talk about the Koran burning incident. And with the General is Dr. Dan Tolley, who is also involved with that and with Soft Power Solutions. General?
Thank you, Art. Thanks for that intro. And Dr. Tolley is definitely a great part of this, a key player and leader in this, and not only what this event, but what led up to it. Let me put this in context a little bit and set the stage and then go through the event. Soft power. If you can just remember or realize it is a geopolitical term that was coined by a Dr. Joseph Nye, who was an undersecretary at the time, but now is the dean of the Kennedy School of Government. Soft power was using a nation's assets to attract and collaborate relationships rather than hard power, which was to use economics and or direct payment and military force. We found that on the battlefield in my experience of our military, to the point where it is now part of our doctrine. So to set the stage, we began learning a lot about soft power over the years, and one of the things we needed to do is make sure we brought knowledge and ground truth to the point of need within communities for the enduring piece of it. And we found that technology such as geospatial capacity and social media provided that kind of leverage for us to get that ground truth right to the point of need, and actually pierce the deceptions of Al-Qaeda and the Taliban in this case. So I want to go over an experience that Dr. Tolley and I and Robert Dowling, who you're going to hear from a little later, was involved in, and how we'd accomplished this. So let me see. Let me push the next real quick. The situation was that Bobby Dowling had brought to Dr. Tolley's attention Death to America messages coming out of Pakistan and Bahrain, quite a few. And this is shortly after our engagement in Pakistan, where we supported and built relationships with about 200 different Pakistani government and civilian organizations to help with a millennium flood disaster that was going on there. Our soldiers in the background improperly disposed of Korans. As Art Kalinski put it real well in a conversation, is that the proper way to dispose of an American flag is a ceremonial burning. You put it on a stick and light it is not the way to do it. And our soldiers improperly disposed of it, and the Taliban used that. We initiated discussions with our General Effendi, our contact there. We used our geospatial and social media tools to find out where most of the events were happening, and we decided to target and diffuse the issue. In this area, we determined, using this technology, that there were 16 provinces and 22 locations that we wanted to target and have ceremonies. We also bought Korans to pass out and actually drafted a letter from the American people expressing condolence and explaining, bringing the ground truth to the fact that this was an act of the uninformed and not deliberate. The relationships that we used as a foundation for using this technology were phenomenal. 200 organizations within Pakistan and Afghanistan, plus the religious leader for that particular country. So we distributed to 16 provinces. Respected Afghan and Pakistani leaders presided, and we had 3 border crossing convoys escorted by Pakistan and Afghan military. It resulted in the first grassroots meeting of the loyal Jirga or tribal chiefs in about 187 years. In these pictures, you'll see where they came together, and a lot of it again was relationships, and then the ability to communicate and demonstrate the ground truth of what was going on. Next here. In this letter, we also communicated in a way that the Pashtuns would understand, in the type of language and the type of prose. Very important that the foundation is set when we use this technology to multiply our capacity and engagement. The Korans were blessed, passed on, and the leaders and the community began to realize that this was a mistake, and according to their culture and their religion, forgiveness is a part of it. So after 7 days and $25,000 and the ability to target, I won't use target, to locate and to identify where we could do the most good using a lot of these technologies, a fatwa of forgiveness was issued. and this fatwa is for it is Islam or a Muslim to disobey is a sin, and it was issued nationwide, which totally frustrated the Taliban and Al Qaeda. Go to the next here. So the outcome was complete. It was completed in 7 days at a cost of $25,000. U.S. CENTCOM came to visit us and said that they had tried to. They were trying to put a plan into place that would cost about 1.6 or 1.2 million dollars, take about 6 weeks, and asked how we did it. And we said it was two things: it was relationships, it was understanding what the issue was, and it was allowing the proper use of this technology to help us bring knowledge and ground truth right to the point of need. Okay. And I think that was it. It was a short story. It was very relevant, and I remember General Effendi, who was our contact in Pakistan, as we sat down and tried to reflect on this, was that if you need friends today, you need to have made them yesterday. So, hey Dan, you were with me through. Yeah, Dan, you were with this whole thing from the beginning. Actually, you were the one that caught the initial phone calls. Any thoughts you want to add to this?
I think one of the key items here is the geospatial tagging, our ability to watch where some of these messages of hate were coming, and then our ability to respond to those messages, explaining the fatwa in a very, very short text once the fatwa was given. And that gave us the ability to both monitor in real time the uptick, and it also gave us a way to monitor in real time the decrease. So it was not only an alerting function for a geospatial problem, it was a communication function that we did going back the other way. So it was a very critical part of the solution, in addition to understanding the people, understanding the culture, and using both of those.
Great, thank you, Dan. And that concludes my talk right now, and I'll be open for questions at the end of the session.
Thank you, Skip. And as a retired military guy, I can't tell you how pleased I was to hear this, because I can just imagine. One thing you didn't mention is that right after that fatwa was issued, to my understanding, all the violence stopped. Up until that fatwa was issued, I think 23 people had already died, and we don't know how many of our soldiers would have died had it not been stopped. But by stopping it, nobody came back in body bags, which I think is wonderful. And it just points out the power of the social media, monitoring the social media, analyzing it, and then getting the geospatial component to understand where these events are occurring and how to head them off. And the person that's really the expert at that is Bob Dowling with GeoCOP, and it was his system that was used to monitor this. And with that, I'm going to ask Bob to talk about GeoCOP and its uses primarily domestically here in the United States. Bob?
Thank you very much, Art. Let me start by saying that GeoCOP is another government acronym for Geospatial Common Operating Picture, and the website and white paper, geocop.com, and there's also an active demo, geocop.net. I wanted to spend my time here just describing why the government needs this system still today, why it's in use actually now in several other countries, allies of the United States worldwide. And it basically is a gap filler that picks up social monitoring as part of an aggregate of data so we can make real-time tactical decisions, especially when lives are on the line, such as in natural disasters and terror attacks, and hopefully prevent them before they happen. Essentially, GeoCOP, I'll refer to 7 T's, the 7 T's of GeoCOP: track, tag, trace, trend, target, and tactical reporting. If we could see all that in a synchronized global fashion, the best example, at least that I know of right now, is GeoCOP. The picture we're looking at on this slide actually is capturing one tragic event, another one at Virginia Tech, that occurred December 8th, 2011. An officer by the name of Derek Krause had pulled over a vehicle on the campus of Virginia Tech, and without notice, a student from another college walked up and put a single bullet in Officer Krause's head. Within seconds, the campus started buzzing on social networks to include Twitter, Facebook, Foursquare, MySpace. Those tweets, those Facebook images, the reporting coming literally from the scene, including crime scene photos, not taken by law enforcement, taken by students and concerned citizens who were present at the scene. We began to trend another violent act that occurred, and within seconds had geocoded right to the location on campus, showing mapping from a variety of map sources. Particularly and importantly, as Art said earlier, the Twitter feed, being able to ascertain those which are real and credible and those that aren't. The imagery was being immediately funneled into national capital regions, and we, within 15 minutes, had a clear and present vision of what had occurred at Virginia Tech, including the death of the shooter by his own hand. This is just one example of a real-time, automated, synchronized, and global situation awareness tool. Many others exist. We actually, within GeoCOP, ingest those tools and those other systems and those video feeds and those IP addresses, and we actually score them within the matrix of a spot report, and then in the tactical reporting system, push those to all the right people instantly. When something happens around the world, like a terror attack or attack on our troops, we now see it in real time or near real time. We are making tactical decisions better and faster than we ever have been able to do so. We'll switch to the next slide. More recently, we've seen tragedies at grade schools, elementary schools, and other campuses and places of worship. Our team is based in Martinsburg, West Virginia. Our team of GeoCops, much like Skip and others here, have served their country honorably. They want to still serve. Our GeoCops have now made a concerted effort to focus on school violence, to interdict before it happens. We have 3 examples that have occurred recently: Staten Island, Houston, Texas, Murrieta, California. Staten Island, we had an individual last month tweeting in real time, "I sit in this stupid class all day long thinking of special ways to kill every kid in here." Our system captured that, scored it, instantly went into images, saw a real and present threat, made a 911 call from Martinsburg, West Virginia, and the kid was apprehended and placed in custody by New York Police Department. Houston, Texas, January 8th, 2013, a kid said, "Who wants to help me blow my school up tomorrow?" ? Another student, feeling that that was not the right thing to say on a worldwide system like Twitter, said, "You should watch it. The Popo is monitoring this system these days," which was met by the student threatening to blow the school up. "F the Popo, I'll do what I want anytime I want." That scored higher than he would have scored with just the threat to blow up the school. He was placed in custody by Houston ISD, and to our knowledge is awaiting trial, still in custody. Last but not least, Murrieta, Georgia, we had another kid threatening to shoot up and blow his school up. We captured that seconds after that tweet was posted. We were able to identify where it came from, down to the individual school. Within seconds, notified school resource officers and the administration. Kid was apprehended. A weapon search was done at the residence. A weapon was found, and that kid also is facing charges. To use this in a predictive policing fashion is a no-brainer. We do it every day. We're making 50 calls a day from HMS Technologies headquarters in Martinsburg, West Virginia. Of the 50, we've had 2 that we're now being credited with actually stopping school violence. The image of the individual student with the Glock to his head happened last Thursday, and in real time, we made notification after he tweeted, and I quote, "I am going to shoot up and blow this school up," unquote. our system is, again, able to identify proximity, set a trend, establish veracity, track, tag, trace, all open source, nothing that has been locked down or closed, but anything that is open source is fair game. Again, it's called Geospatial Common Operational Picture, and the site is based on GeoCOP.com, and also the demo is GeoCOP.net. There's also another piece of GeoCOP, a smaller version called TAC Trend, which is tactical trending, and that allows schools and businesses and critical infrastructure and law enforcement, local, state, federal, fire and rescue, and others to actually see imagery, video, IP address, establish codes worldwide, and most importantly, especially for the global use case, translate on the glass in real time. And I think that's it for my piece.
Good. Thank you very much, Bob. I really appreciate it. And, with most of the people on being GIS professionals, this entire ability to take that data and get it displayed in an easy-to-use fashion. And, in fact, our next speaker is going to talk about taking that information and then putting it into easy-to-use Geo PDFs that can be used for collaboration. And most important with the Geo PDFs is they can even be used disconnected from the net once that data is downloaded. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Lutton. And Steve, if you could tell us about GeoXray and its creation of Geo PDFs.
Sure, Art. Thank you. As Art mentioned, I'm with Terrago Technologies, and Terrago has a suite of products that provide location-defined intelligence to the edge and back. And what I'm going to focus on today is another product in the ecosystem of products that are complementary products to process text-based, unstructured text and semi-structured text, and georeference them, and then process them, mine, organize, and analyze them to determine basically timely, relevant content geographically. And geography is a basic organizing principle of human society, as I'm sure most of the audience can relate to, being in the GIS or geospatial information field. GeoXray helps all sorts of organizations, from governments, businesses, to individuals, make better decisions faster by leveraging the discovery of opportunities to capitalize on and threats to mitigate across place, time, and topics. And our customers are challenged by data overload. The amount of information, especially electronically, because of the internet and social media, is growing exponentially. And we'll often find from our customers that they'll say they have too much data to sort for what's relevant to their geographic area. They're worried they don't have enough time to figure out what's important. They don't have enough staff with the current budget environment. And they're very concerned they're going to miss something very important. In fact, various studies have determined that between 50 to 80% of a project's time is spent collecting and organizing data in order to analyze it. So there's a productivity problem that we want to be able to address. So in response to that, we created GeoXray, which is an easy way to mine, organize, analyze, and share content across places, time, and topics. And our server system that processes all this data is accessed through an intuitive thin client interface that we have available, which runs and visualizes data on top of either Google Maps or ESRI map servers, And also we have a very well-defined and documented web service API to build custom solutions upon. And so it provides both geographically and topically organized information so that the analysts have a faster time to insight. And so this geographic information organized that way can get greater relevance so that the information can be absorbed with less effort in a very short period of time, which is quite important nowadays. And how we do that is basically apply what we call a triple filter to the data, the text data coming in. And what we see there is the Venn diagrams of being able to filter by topic and by time. And we specialize by adding in a further filter for geography. So what places is the text referring to, so that we analyze that smaller data set, and that data relevance goes up if it's about the right topic at the right time in the right place. So how does GeoXray work? Well, what we do is we take geographic knowledge, or what we're calling in essence structured data, which you see there depicted in the left side, GeoXray geographic knowledge, and that is really a place signature. So it's a text description of a place. What do they call a place? What are some of the alternative names that people refer to refer to that place? What do they do there? Who might work there? Anything we can know about a place, we define in a place signature. And then over on the right-hand side, you see that we bring in content, which is derived from either blogs, news sites, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc., and internal reports, say out of a database internally, or reports that you have on your disk drive. And we correlate them, in essence, with the place signatures so that it organizes it according to the places that the content is talking about. And, previously we talked about Twitter feeds, do have sometimes have metadata information about location. Some people, less than 1%, as Eric mentioned, actually associate their GPS location with, say, a Twitter message. But also, of course, when you register for a Twitter account, you can choose to put in a location in your profile. That can be extracted and associated with the Twitter message. But what we do with GeoXray is we do take advantage of that a priori, as it were, to add in, to feed into GeoXray. But what we really do is analyze what is inside the message and link it to very, very fine-grained specific places, organizations, and specific buildings. So that gives us that situational awareness, so that, again, we get faster conclusions with less manpower and lower cost. So as example, I wanted to show a couple of scenarios. One is we're just in the country of Yemen, and we've defined very fine-grained detail about places, and these place signatures, in essence, of various locations in Yemen. So right now we're in the Taiz area, one of the larger cities in Yemen, and we're zoomed into an area around Freedom Square. And as you see there, we've defined the place signature in both English and in Arabic, and that's another advantage of our approach, is we can be multilingual and attract content in all these different languages. And so this example is showing we're collecting tweets and Facebook posts for Freedom Square in Taiz, so specific events around that location and what people are saying about that location. In this case, read that gunfire is heard near Freedom Square, artillery shelling in 60th Street in Taiz, and the neighborhoods near Freedom Square. This gives the user or the analyst some very good information to continue to understand what's going on in that area. Very quickly, we also are looking here, say, at the U.S. Embassy in Sana'a, and we find out that there's a tweet that indicates that there's a Facebook posting inviting people to come to a protest at 4 p.m. tomorrow. So this was not as bad as the Benghazi event, but there was a protest in front of that area and caused some consternation for the U.S. Embassy there. So this is the Facebook posting in Arabic, which basically say a vigil in front of the U.S. Embassy tomorrow at 4 p.m. So, GeoXray, as I mentioned, can organize things according to place, but also topics. So we're showing here topical concepts that are associated with conflict, politics, and water, and visualizing how they would be interrelated for that particular set of topics. And further, we have a system where you can be alerted based on that profile if something comes up fitting that profile. So what we're doing here is analyzing information and associating it with places and topics. And this information can be shared. As Art was mentioning, Terrago has a suite of products, including a Geo PDF capability, which basically is a location-based intelligence report that can be read very easily in any Adobe Reader kind of application and is further geo-referenced with layers of information. So that concludes my introduction to GeoXray and Terrago technologies.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. And one thing, when I was at the ESRI Federal Users Conference, the one point that they highlighted that we should all keep in mind, especially when we're talking about emergency responders or operating, as we say, on the edge, is by bringing all that data into a Geo PDF. That Geo PDF then can be used offline. You don't have to keep going back to the servers or to the internet to continue to update, to use the data, the information. It can be used locally, and in fact, you can do collaboration locally between police units or fire units, et cetera, even though you may not have connectivity. And, that's been a shortcoming of a lot of the online capabilities. So, all right, well, thank you very much, Steve. And, we're starting to get towards the tail end of our session here, and I thought on a light note I might finish with an example that was provided at the ESRI Federal Users Conference that shows the really important aspect of having both the location and the social media. One of the companies, Topsy, showed where they did an analysis. You may remember during the Super Bowl, there was a Volkswagen commercial where this white guy was speaking like a Jamaican in an office up in Minnesota. And, eventually the entire office was speaking Jamaican. Well, at first glance, the news media and social media were just all over this thing as it being racist and making fun until Topsy did an overlay of GIS demographic data on top of the location of the tweets and Facebook comments. And the thing that they discovered, which was a surprise, is that the majority of people who felt that the ad was racist primarily were in neighborhoods were predominantly white middle class. And on the other hand, predominantly black neighborhoods and even tweets from Jamaica itself indicated they didn't think it was racist at all. In fact, they kind of liked it. So, I think that if we just look at tweets and social media by itself without being able to analyze it in a geospatial realm, we don't have the full picture. So that concludes the formal part of our presentation here. And what I would like to do now is start answering some questions. I already have one question listed here, and I think he's using a term that I'm not familiar with, so whoever answers this question, please explain the term. And the question is, can you address truckyard uses and the spoofing most common to that industry so important today? So I'm not familiar with the term truckyard in this respect. Anybody answer that?
Yeah, Art, this is Eric. In terms of spoofing, what immediately comes to mind for me is GPS spoofing, and that's been a pretty hot topic that maybe you've heard about even in the last, year or so. There was a study, some research done down at a university in Texas where they successfully spoofed a GPS receiver on a UAV as an experiment. And what spoofing means is that you, generally speaking, is that you send out signals that emulate GPS satellite signals, although at a much stronger sense, and basically take over the navigation of the GPS navigation of the receiver. And so you can tell it, basically tell that to go somewhere else. You can, instead of it using the actual GPS satellites, now you're in control of that, of the position that GPS receiver outputs. That's what I think. Well, that's what I think about when I hear the term spoofing. Now, I mean, there's a lot of research being done about that now, and there's many ways to overcome that, or to, I guess, deny that spoofing. And of course in UAVs they don't just use GPS; they use inertial nav and others that you can check against. And so if GPS location and the inertial nav system diverge, then you know something's wrong there. And there's some other things you can do too. But that's what I'm thinking about when I hear the term spoofing. I don't know if that's what he intends, but that's what I think about.
Yeah, the term that I didn't understand was the term Truckyard in response to that. Can anybody fill us in on what that term means, Truckyard uses?
Art, this is Bob Dowling again. I think that that would be a supply chain question, and in the social monitoring spectrum, at least within our GeoCOP arena, we would see what's happening is people are actually spoofing accounts now, like Twitter and Facebook and Foursquare, and actually vectoring not just trucks but other forms of transportation that have high valuable equipment and technology. Cigarette trucks come to mind.
Okay. Well, if that answers the question, or if it doesn't, the person that submitted that, if you could clarify that, we'd appreciate it. And Eric, I believe you had some additional questions that had come in.
Well, I just had some of my own. I thought I would talk about a bit more. We've talked about Twitter, and at least I talked about Twitter specifically, and other social media. And when I think of, and I'm just sort of speaking off the top of my head here, when I think of social media in terms of location, I really don't think of Facebook, and maybe some of the other panel members can chime in too, because to me, Facebook really isn't suited to location type of technology. Twitter is, but what's interesting to me, in this discussion I had with a social media location guy at ESRI, he was saying that Twitter is really starting to tighten up their terms of service, and they're making it much more difficult for developers to mine data from tweets. That Twitter is trying to force people to go through the Twitter interface instead of allowing companies like ESRI and others to mine data and create useful kind of maps. And so what I think that might do is open up an opportunity for another piece of software or other pieces of commercial software that would compete with Twitter. And I know there's others out there, but one of the ones I was thinking of, and not to bring this in, just sort of a separate subject, is one called Ushida. I think it's Ushida. And maybe some of the other folks here have heard about that too. Ushahidi. And it's an open source, I believe, sort of crowd mapping software specifically for crisis management. It's a nonprofit type of organization. But you talked about these events over in the Middle East and in Africa and so on. And this piece of software is built specifically for crisis events. And so it's not like ESRI is trying to take Twitter and sort of tweak it into something that's useful for social mapping. It's a product. This Ushahidi was built specifically for geolocating, crisis, disaster management kind of scenarios where someone can type into this app, and they're not limited to 140 characters. They can type into this app, hey, we need water, and you'll have a geolocation assigned to it, or there's a huge fire at this particular location here. It's an app specifically built for that. So I think what Twitter is doing, and it's sort of like what Facebook has done for social media. Facebook sort of introduced social media to the world, but then all of a sudden you have the Twitters, the Instagrams, and the other very more specific, fine-tuned apps for other types of specific uses. And I think maybe Twitter will sort of run its course, and if they get too tight on allowing enterprise organizations to access their data, then the utility of it is going to decline, and then it's going to open up space for other types of very, very, very specific social media utilities with geolocation capabilities. And again, I didn't have a certain agenda there. I'm just sort of throwing some conversation items out there, and I don't know if any of the panel members want to comment on that.
Dead air time. I'm going to have to ask a question. I guess the thing that always that has interested me is again talking about the mechanics of the location of this, because only a small I was surprised what a small percentage actually have their GPS location turned on or enabled, and so the majority of the work has to occur with some pretty powerful computers to try to derive and mine that data based on comments and things of that nature. But Dan, can you address how close these can be determined off of the internet nodes or cell phone towers, things of that nature? I think Dan is off. How about Bob? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, maybe.
I'll take a swing at it, Art. I'll take a swing at it. I think the answer is depends on carriers, depends on locations on planet Earth, and it also depends on that single node, that sensor, if you will, that's in the hand of an evildoer that probably is not these days, not broadcasting. However, the people around them, and we see this every day, it's not the suspect or suspects that we have to go get paper on anymore and get into corporate accounts like Twitter and Facebook. It's actually others that are, there's so many people that are using, I heard a statistic this past week that 1 in 7 individuals on the planet are currently using Twitter, 1 in 7. So we actually establish credibility in a lot of cases, not from the individuals that we're going after or monitoring or want to monitor, especially if they're not broadcasting or if the towers aren't giving us information we need openly. We'll look at the other people around that subject or subjects and derive a lot of really rich detail that we can put together.
Yeah, so actually I'd like to comment on that and maybe ask a question. Is it my understanding is that if you don't have your location services enabled on your phone, there's no way you can get a location, even based on towers. I mean, because that's sort of the first, I guess that's, if nothing else, if you don't have a GPS receiver in your phone or it's turned off and there's no Wi-Fi around, you can use cell towers for positioning. Now, granted, it's hundreds of meters of accuracy. It's not 10 meters or something like that. But still, even to use the cell tower location, you need to have location services enabled on the phone. Is that not correct? But that's my understanding.
I would say on that question, about 50% of the cases that we're alerting on are, in fact, made using location from towers and people that have opted in. The other 50% comes from good old gumshoe tradecraft. I'll use a school example where a kid is pleading he's going to shoot his school up, but he's not broadcasting the location and he's not saying the school. We go back into the Twitter account, look through Instagram, and identify things like football jerseys, stadiums, scoreboards, and even pep rally posters that identify where the school is without ever having to go into the technical side of where is this kid broadcasting from, because the geolocator has been turned off. So there are a ton of ways to establish geocodes, that many of which do not involve technology. They just involve a simple tradecraft.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
So this is Steve Lutton speaking. Just to add a different perspective on, in the case of what we do with GeoXray is we actually process the message itself and link it to the place that the message is talking about. Of course, if it's talking about a place, and then that can backtrack to a particular user or a particular author, and you can track to where they may be located as far as other inferred information. But the key point I wanted to make is you can also not only just use the metadata, as it were, from the tweet, but also understand what they're talking about as far as a place inside the message.
Good. I got another question that came in. It's ESRI related. The question is, what are the best ways to consume social media and public media within ESRI software. Bob or Steve?
This is Steve Lutton. I can certainly add in what Terrago Technologies is doing with their GeoXray product. One of the capabilities of the GeoXray product is to export the work product of analyzing within GeoXray in an ESRI compatible format to then ingest into ESRI, create shape files and do mapping around it. In fact, further to generate a Geo PDF out of ESRI's ArcGIS to disseminate or distribute to the edge, as it were, and as Art mentioned, to disconnected users if they need to go into the field and just have an electronic device with them for a while without being network connected. That's one example of just.
Yeah. Eric, I don't know if you have, like on the Hurricane Sandy example, I believe that they were just generating simple shape files of some of the tweets and their locations. Is that correct?
I don't know if it was that simple or not. The process that I heard is that they would go out and mine manually and automatically tweets from that area, the Hurricane Sandy area, and then they would have to cull out the ones that didn't have accurate geolocations. Because if you can imagine, if you didn't have a reasonably accurate Wi-Fi position or GPS and you're just based on cell towers, if the accuracy is only 700 meters, then you start to think about, okay, how relevant is this data if I don't have an accurate geolocation? So like I said before, they were saying there was 2 to 3% people opt in. So even though you have this massive number of tweets, let's say 100,000 of them, you're only going to use 2,000 or 3,000. Now, how can you consume that as a GIS manager? I don't know, because ESRI just launches that as a service now. I haven't seen any kind of products built around that. They may have some, but I'm not aware of some myself.
Well, I can say from the sessions that obviously this is a whole new area for a lot of people. We have a big learning curve how to take advantage of all this information, and it's only going to get more complex. On the other hand, this is going to be quite a tool. I know Jack Dangerman mentioned that his dream ultimately is to have GIS everywhere, and it looks like with the social media and its use and the benefits, that certainly is happening already. I'm just looking real quick if there are any final questions that I'm seeing online or not.
Yeah, this is Eric again. I saw one up there, and someone asked about how do for example, in a city, how is it possible you could report potholes and those kinds of things using Twitter? And sort of the trend that I see is not really that, but there are companies out there that are making free apps. These are social or citizen reporting tools, and CitySourced is one of them. But I think there are more and more apps out there available for Android and iPhone and Windows phones that citizens could download these apps, and as long as the city, the municipality, supports them on the GIS back end, these are fantastic tools for reporting potholes and down trees and hazardous sidewalks and even accidents or that type of thing. And so I'm not sure Twitter is the best avenue. It's interesting. I hadn't thought about this, but I'm not sure it's the best avenue for citizen reporting, because you really need the city to have the back end to support it. Because on these like for example the CitySourced app, you can report a pothole and it automatically gets sent to the city's work order system, and of course someone has to look at it and approve it. But the workflow is really well established and very smooth. Whereas if you had a Twitter report, someone would have to manually probably generate a work order and that sort of thing.
Actually, one last question. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This is Bob again. I was just going to establish there's a veracity issue with the public reporting, and we see it all the time with people that call in bomb threats and then go rob a bank across town. All the assets are across town managing the bomb threat, and the veracity code on that was one tweet. So we actually look at aggregate tweeting and Facebook posts for a lot of different public safety and other services but we have to be very mindful, I think, as we start to go in the E911, electronic 911 direction by importing fleets. There's not a lot of organic veracity that comes with a single tweet. That we go much higher in terms of our matrix scoring with 50 tweets or 100 tweets that say there's a pothole here, there's a bank being robbed here. So officially reporting from a CAD, from a law enforcement or fire and rescue computer-aided dispatch, we can actually automate that process and then incorporate social in kind of a bifurcated way around that mapping.
Interesting.
Okay. I've got one last question that came in for Steve, dealing primarily with GeoXray, and the question is, do you need additional TerraGo software to interface with ESRI or just the GeoXray extension?
Oh, yes. Well, all you need is GeoXray to export the information and then import it into the ESRI ArcGIS. So, if you want to get started with that, all you need is GeoXray.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. Well, with that, does anyone have any other comments they'd like to make before we wrap it up here? All right. I'm assuming there are none. So we thank you very much for your time. Please understand that we've got points of contact information, emails for everybody, so that if you have additional questions or you need to get in touch with some of the people that you've heard today, you can send them an email. There are also URLs listed on the site. And with that, we thank you very much. Eric or Bethany, anything else we need to do?
No, that concludes today's webinar presentation, Social Media and Big Data 101 for GIS Professionals. Once again, this will be available to you online in 2 weeks. Please visit our website, gpsworld.com.
Hey, thanks for